What's going on, everyone? We are the Unqualified Film Bros, back at you with another review tonight. We're talking about one of the first releases of February 2022. Kenneth Branagh's new Who Has Done This? Death on the Nile. What do you guys think?
One, I hated that, but also moving on to the actual meat of the movie.
We don't prep my intros before the show.
Yeah,
They're all
maybe we should start screening those.
Yeah.
George,
Max,
send us a
you want to set up
Start
you want to set up
preparing.
next week's episode, Max? Be my guest.
Sure, why not? I don't know. I mean, I think it was very entertaining, right? Like there's nothing about this film where it's like, I'm bored. I kind of want to leave. Like, it was very entertaining. I think George will talk about this later in the episode, and maybe Ben and Declan will as well. But I thought that generally it was a pretty predictable film, and yet I think it also like kept my interest in very small ways that maybe didn't move the plot forward, but were really interesting in the directional choices that Kenneth Branagh made. And so overall, I thought it was a pretty strong film. You know, I definitely enjoyed it. I had a good time. I think it was worse. I think it was probably a better film than Murder on the Orient Express, and yet I enjoyed Murder on the Orient Express better. And I think the storyline of Murder on the Orient Express was more intriguing for me. That was just I hadn't seen Murder in a while, so that might change as I watch them again. But I generally liked Murder better, but I thought that Death on the Nile was probably just, a better made film.
I would argue, yeah, Murder on the Orient Express, even just the books themselves, it's a better mystery. I personally thought like the movie was adequate, but I had a lot of problems with it. I thought Kenneth Branagh was good. He was the best actor there. I didn't really like the pacing is one of the biggest issues I had with the movie, which is that it spends about an hour and like 10 minutes building up all the characters, and the murder doesn't happen till like halfway in the movie, which is fine for a book. However, with a movie, it feels very quick to wrap things up, so you don't really get to grips with the crime itself. It's very based on the characters, and for me, a lot of the characters also felt really flat. They felt like really generic characters, and the only person that I really enjoyed was like Book, Rosalie, and Hercule Poirot.
To your point, Ben, Tom Bateman's performance as Book is outstanding.
Yeah,
he was very much like pushed off to the side, ornamental, sort of just there as a confidant for Poirot in Murder on the Orient Express. And in Death on the Nile, he is a central character. He's second really only to Poirot, and he gets top billing because it's alphabetical and his last name is Bateman. But still, he's charismatic. He handles the drama. Spoiler alert is in effect. We don't really need to say that for our reviews anymore. You guys know.
Yeah.
Yep.
When he gets killed, I mean, I could have guessed that that Lynette would get killed. She was the one who was paranoid for the entire first act, that everyone who was invited to their honeymoon was out to get her and her husband. But Simon, yes. And yeah, no, it is freshest in your mind. You just walked out of the theater.
It is true. It is true. Managed to just get in time.
But yeah, when Book was killed, I mean, Tom Bateman gives, as great as Kenneth Branagh is in this film, Tom Bateman, right from when he's flying a kite up on a pyramid, is the most charismatic performer on the screen every time he's there.
You know,
also, just while we're talking about the cast, Emma Mackey as Jackie is phenomenal.
Yeah, she was very
Great.
good.
Yeah.
Emma
Yeah.
Mackey of Sex Education fame. This is a very different role, where she plays kind of the interloper.
Mhm.
Well, not the interloper. Actually, Gal Gadot plays the interloper, but
Yeah.
Emma Mackey plays kind of like
Mhm.
the spurned lover, and I think does so really well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
For a
she's the
young
most believable.
yeah, for sure.
I think
She's a
that's
young
like,
actor too. Like
Yeah.
it's not
Oh,
like
yeah.
she's some
yeah.
seasoned, award laden
Mm.
actress. She is relatively young and maybe
Sex Education is, I think,
Yeah.
her biggest role prior to this.
it is. And
Yeah.
for one, she is brilliant in that show too. So I'm not taking anything away from that performance. And yet this is a very different role where she is a little bit more reserved, I think, in terms of the character that she plays, where it has to be disguised. Sex Education is all about promoting safe sex and promoting all of that great stuff, and this is a very different role, so it's more internal, and I think she did a really great job of portraying that kind of character that is mysterious and believable at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think she did a great job.
Yeah. I'll
And I
definitely say I feel like the cast, like, really, there's a lot of like big sort of shifts kind of between it, like as you're saying, she's great, Branagh's great. I feel like it felt sort of off that Armie Hammer wasn't trying to eat his female co-stars at any point. No, but no,
How do you mute someone?
Was that?
That was
Nothing.
rough.
Go on.
No, but like I kind of felt like Armie Hammer was almost like he was almost like played almost like they were trying to do a double bluff, but it didn't fully pay off, and that it's
He was
like
entirely absent for the second act of the film.
like, yeah, exactly. And he's like, oh, he seems sort of suspicious. Is he actually?
Yeah.
But he was so suspicious that he can't be the one,
When his character Simon is shot by Jackie, I thought it was, just from a filmmaking perspective, I'm in film school, the shot of Jackie firing the gun cut to Simon holding a bloody napkin or tissue or handkerchief on his knee, and I thought, little weird not to show the wound. And so right from there I was like, something's a little off with this, because they wouldn't just do that deliberately. And then of course it came to be that that was a blank, and he had red paint just handy to make it look like he had been shot. And then he actually did shoot himself in the knee, which I thought was pretty badass.
Very gritty. But I have a central problem with the mystery, which is it's pretty easy to figure out. In fact, I figured it out very early on, because Jackie either needs to be the world's greatest detective, which obviously we know she's not, because he's already on the boat. She finds this man anywhere in the world.
Oh yeah.
I'm sorry, what? What is she working for the CIA? No, obviously she's getting some inside information there. So it kind of ruined the mystery in that regard. But I think I could, engage with that. Like, I've, obviously watched movies where the mystery, I already know the ending to it. The movie overall is a good movie. And my problem with this is there's some really great performances and juxtaposed with some really performances.
I think Annette Bening was one of those
the thing
with
about
her facial
this
expressions throughout the
cast,
second half of the movie.
Yeah.
This cast was, I mean, I'm going to compare it to Murder on the Orient Express because I feel like that's what we have to do here. But in the first film, everyone in the cast was essential to the story, was essential to the plot, was essential to the mystery, was essential to the murder. And here in Death on the Nile, you get characters like Book's mother, Euphemia, played by Annette Bening. You get Dawn French. You get Ali Fazal. All these characters are ornamental at best, to the story that's happening, they're there just to create more suspects.
Well, that's
Yeah.
what I think is like what was so brilliant about Murder on the Orient Express. And again, spoiler alerts for that movie as well, is that everybody did it
Yeah.
in Murder on the Orient
Yeah.
Express.
Mhm.
And so like it made sense to have all of these big name actors to avoid red herrings and to
Mhm.
avoid, oh, I think this person did it because they're the biggest name in the film, or outside of Kenneth Branagh, obviously. So like, you know, Willem Dafoe is in Murder on the Orient Express. And so like in any other movie with, you know, some nobodies or lesser known names, I'd be like, oh yeah, Willem Dafoe did it. Or like Johnny Depp planned his own murder or something like that. But I think
This
it didn't
Josh
quite.
Gad disrespect will not stand.
Josh Gad of Frozen fame.
Hey, of Book of Mormon fame,
Frozen, Beauty and the Beast, Book of Mormon fame,
The Wedding Ringer with Kevin Hart.
of Josh Gad fame.
Yeah.
Did not, you know, but like, you know, I think that is that I think you're right. Is that's something that worked against this film, is that they had the same kind of casting where it's like everybody is recognizable to a certain degree. And I think even if like Emma Mackey or some of the older actors like Annette Bening weren't recognizable, they were cause for suspicion from the beginning, which could ruin the illusion. And I think they probably needed to go the opposite direction and cast everybody as new and upcoming actors, with the exception of you know, Hercule Poirot, or even you know, one other big name actor or something like that.
Yeah,
just like the motivations for the character themselves, like I don't think a lot of them were believable. Like, oh yeah, they could have killed, like the only person you could suspect was like Cousin Andrew, where you could
But even
suspect
so, his
Simon
character was
and
so
Jackie.
one-dimensional in
Yeah,
his
and Cousin Andrew's like,
relationship
no, that guy's
to
not,
Lynette.
because he's like a pure bad, like until his like breakdown, like, oh no, I just, you know, almost tried to kill them. I wasn't the one who actually killed them. It was just lapse of judgment.
That was a great moment where he was like, if I had killed him, I would have used this, and he pulls out his own gun.
Yeah,
that was pretty cool.
It would have Russell Brand's character, who, by the way, I'll give credit where it's due. But I saw this with my family. They all didn't know who it was and were like, "What actor is that?" And I said it was Russell Brand. They were like shocked, you know, because they didn't.
This isn't your get him to the Greek forgetting Sarah Marshall, Russell Brand.
Yeah, no, exactly. But still, he would have been a great suspect, but they didn't at all develop his character until after he's just been looking over people. It's kind of like once he's no longer a suspect, that's when he's given more interesting depth, kind of. But
I feel like the setup to a lot of these characters, and pardon the expression here because I don't know if it's the right phrase to use, but in the film's first act, it just feels a little half-assed. Just because the first act is so expository when it doesn't need to be.
Yeah,
because all you really need here is you don't need Poirot as a young soldier in World War I as much as Declan loved it. You don't need the, you know, infirmary ward. You don't even really need the cafe society where Lynette gets between Simon and Jackie for the first time. You just need to know who Poirot is, and you need to know that all of these people are going to be on a boat together on the Nile.
Yeah.
And that's the strength of Murder on the Orient Express, is that you've got all of these characters together in the same situation, and you don't know their connections to each other, if there are any at all. And that's where this film just couldn't reach the level of Murder.
Yeah, and
it just couldn't. It didn't show their relationship. It showed their relationships too much to make the synopsis of mystery believable. It was an engaging film, but we knew too much after the first act to really get into the nitty-gritty during Poirot's interviews in the second act.
Yeah,
but, I mean,
I'll just very quickly say, I feel like in some ways, starting off on Murder on the Orient Express is almost unintentionally shooting yourself in the foot a little bit, because that's, I mean, yeah, I'm not the biggest Poirot head or anything like that, but I feel like most people would probably agree that's the best Poirot story, and it's such a it's kind of a bit of a subversion of the classic mystery by having it be everyone and not actually one single person, and so it's brilliant. It's a brilliant. It adds a whole layer to the entire story and mystery. So when you try to follow that up, and but still sort of do the same thing, but also still have it be one person, it's kind of like setting itself up for being less than the previous film. Like what Max was saying about like maybe they should have had everyone be an unknown. That actually I think that might have been a better choice for this one. Or maybe keep like Gal Gadot as
I
her
mean, I
character.
think keep some red herrings in there, keep some big names, but you know,
Murder
don't
on the
even
Orient
like,
Express,
yeah.
everyone was a big name.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Murder
And
on the Orient
I had
Express is an
no
absurd-
idea. I hadn't read the book, so I had no idea what was going to happen. And that's
I-
what I loved
yeah.
about Murder,
Mhm.
But
is
I think
that the reveal, also the reveal was so much more interesting than, this one. He kind of just like shot the gun and was like, I know who it was, and then
Yeah.
told everyone, and then that was the scene. It wasn't like, like in Murder, it was them getting off of the train and talking about
That beautiful shot at the mouth of the
Oh.
tunnel. I mean, just gorgeous.
It was like
And the
it
cinematography in
was
this
like
film was
it looked
fantastic
like it
too.
looked like
Really?
The Last Supper
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
Murder, right? Like that was what was so brilliant about it, is that there were, I think, 12 of them maybe sitting down,
Mm.
and it looked incredible. So it was such a good scene and a good reveal. This was just, it just fell a little bit flat.
I mean, they shot on location a lot. There was the use of CGI and green screens
Oh, yeah.
for portions of this film, but I feel like just the production design, the train versus the boat. I'm gonna just break it down to its bare components. The way that Murder on the Orient Express was set up was, from a filmmaking perspective, a lot stronger just in production design than
Mhm.
Death on the Nile.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that. I feel like in some ways, just on paper, like purely on paper, a train is a more dynamic setting for a movie than a boat is in general. Obviously, you can poke holes in that thing, but again, it sort of feels like how I feel like it feels how it feels a bit of a step back kind of from the first one.
Well,
It just, again, still good, but just can't quite reach those levels.
I think,
to that note, oh, go ahead, Ben.
I was just gonna say, like, overall, I just think a lot of the things in this movie fell flat, and they weren't able to develop. I mean, a lot of the characters, like, part of the strength of like Murder on the Orient Express is like, aside from like who's cast, the characters themselves have realistic motivations as to wanting to kill someone, who died. And this one, like, no, barely anyone has a motivation other than like a few people. And so you've already crossed everyone off the suspect list. And aside from that, they've sort of ignored a lot of symbolic value of the text, which is like Cleopatra and Mark Antony. I mean, the story is a modern telling of that in a way. Mark Antony kills Julius Caesar. They both kill themselves, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I think because Mark Antony like escapes the Romans. But it's like a tragic, love story, and it sort of goes into that and the love angle, but it tries to focus on the mystery, and I don't think that's the strong point of the story. And it's the detriment almost that it focuses too much on the mystery and not the characters themselves. So they're all sort of flat, and you don't really care about them.
I want to
Especially
talk.
the person that died.
I want to talk for a minute here. All good points. All good points. I want to talk for a minute here about Kenneth Branagh as Hercule Poirot, because we haven't really discussed his character work much tonight, and it really felt to me like humanizing him a little bit more, whether it was the exposition in World War One or the infirmary ward or his pursuit of an interpersonal relationship that goes beyond working a case.
Mhm.
I feel like that was a detriment to his character. I feel like having him be the cold, calculating, almost robotic detective really made his character work in Murder on the Orient Express. And here he still had a lot of that, but it just felt like he was the central character of Murder on the Orient Express. And in Death on the Nile, it kind of felt like, pardon the phrase, he was along for the ride.
But wasn't that his story arc in the movie, right? Is that he was always along for the ride. He was always trying to be like on vacation or taking a step back from his work. And obviously it is revealed late in the movie that that's not really the case. He was spying for Euphemia, Annette
Bening.
Book's, Annette Bening, who played Book's mom.
Yeah,
Mother.
Yeah,
we're gonna cover all of our bases there and identify who the character was in every facet. But yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of who he was, right? And I think that does kind of show the power of Poirot and the deductive reasoning and skills that he possesses within these movies, is that his focus is kind of divided from the main job that is presented within the movie, which is the murder of Gal Gadot's character, and that he's still able to focus himself in order to look at all the clues, look at all the evidence, and yet still maintain a high level of intellect and reasoning. And then it becomes further complicated once Book dies. And it's very personal to him. And so that obviously affects the way that he thinks about things. And you also get these little moments that I liked a lot in the movie where it would be a close-up shot of Kenneth Branagh's face, sort of symbolizing not necessarily something going wrong, but at least a moment where he is second guessing himself, which we don't really get, to my memory, in Murder on the Orient Express. He's very self-assured. It's brought up in Death on the Nile that he's egotistical, and he says it himself that he has a huge ego. And I just think that it, I don't think that the World War I stuff was necessary at all. We kind of got that exposition from the first movie, from the very first scene where he talks about the eggs and sort of shifts them or moves them or whatever it is. And so, I don't think that was necessary, but I think we get some nice character quirks and moments from Poirot that we didn't get in the first film that add a little bit of depth.
Yeah. I'll also just say, I gotta be honest, like, even though George was mocking me for it earlier, I was not expecting the World War I flashback at the beginning. Like that genuinely took me by surprise to see that. And I do think, like, to build sort of a little bit on what we were talking about, I feel like it's only thanks to Kenneth Branagh being a good actor that he got scarred in World War I, and that's why he grows a mustache explanation doesn't come across as genuinely ridiculous.
Not just a mustache, the mustache worn by his captain.
Yes, like exactly. Like
but also he's got no scars on his face.
If it's kind of like, if you like, I feel like when I was watching it, I was like, okay, but if you told me that was a scene in the movie, I probably would have like gone like, ugh, or something, or like thought that was just utterly ridiculous.
It's really dumb.
Like it's still I was like, I thought it was like kind of silly in the movie. If if it wasn't like Kenneth Branagh, if this was like the first movie in starring someone's version of Poirot, I think it would genuinely be mocked, like as a creative decision to have done it that way.
I watched that opening and I had to check if I was colorblind, like spontaneous color blindness, because it was black and white, and I was like,
Okay.
did the lights just go out in my corneas or something? That was it was an
Okay.
interesting creative choice to do the flashback in black and white, but then you
Mhm.
also should have done the Cafe Society in black and white.
That's
rest of the
so
movie in
weird because
black and white.
I was thinking the same thing, George. Right? Like I
Thank
was in
you.
the movie theater
Thank
and
you.
it might not have been the exact same thought process, but I was like, oh, maybe like, is there a bulb out in the thing? Because it went on for so long. And
Yeah.
I know I said that I think that Death on the Nile is like a better film than Murder on the Orient Express. I still stand by that. And yet, here we are. So I just want to put that out there.
That's what we do, though. We pick these things
Yeah.
apart.
Yeah.
I have a few critiques to make.
Mhm.
One of them is obviously
Go off,
like,
King.
so with it's really unnecessary, like you were talking about the beginning. I don't think it adds too much, but the bigger thing is you guys are talking about like, having him be more human. It is a detriment, but I don't think it's a detriment to his character. I actually like that
Mhm.
because, as I said before, I think the strength of the story is in the human quality.
Mhm.
It's a detriment in that it really shows how little development the other characters have. A lot of the actors are trying very hard to give their characters a lot more meaning, but they really don't have a lot to go on because they don't have a lot of time. And that's just a serious detriment to the movie overall. It really seems like the story has been laid out over a movie, the story of a book. And no, not book. The book actually, has more time to develop all this stuff, whereas a movie, it just seems like some parts are being rushed through, especially the character development. And because, as we've said, the mystery is like, it's okay, it's not all that grand. Without really good characters, it's just a mediocre mystery.
Yeah.
Which is overall just sort of what I've been saying. I think it's the main complaint I have. It looks good, it's entertaining to a degree, but a lot of the characters I couldn't help but be like, this is a caricature. It's not a character.
It's engaging due largely to Kenneth Branagh's performance.
Yeah.
I think is the crux of the matter.
And the other
Because
characters. It's just a very uneven, like some people are doing really well and some people are not. And also just overall, there's not a lot of time for any character other than, I'd say, Book. I mean, not even Simon, Lynette, like any of them don't have enough time. It's Book and Poirot.
Jackie.
That's it.
Book, Jackie, and
Jackie.
I will say, I did not expect to enjoy Letitia Wright's performance as much as I did.
Mhm.
I thought she was a top 5 performer in this film with everyone we've just mentioned.
Yeah.
The character is dealing with, her relationship with Book and managing her aunt's career and, dealing with the pressure of Book's mother, Annette Bening, Madame Book. We'll go through all her character names again. Callback. The character is one of, I think, as Ben was saying, one of a few with genuine depth and dimensionality. So I just wanted to toss some praise to Letitia Wright.
She did great.
Yeah, no, she was very good. I will say my only criticism, and I don't think it's really criticism for her. The only scene where I was like, why, was the scene where Lynette is signing contracts and she goes out just like, I hope you started, you didn't stop reading contracts. Okay, all right, that's a little on the nose. It's a little aggressive for a movie to do.
One probably could have made that a bit more natural.
Yeah, it
somehow.
was not subtle at all, and I was just like, okay, I couldn't take it. But overall, like after that, she was really good. So I was ready to write her off, and then she did really well. So I can't criticize her. I criticize probably Kenneth Branagh for that one. They could have done a better take, done that whole thing better. But yeah, she was very good.
So, question for you guys. Do you think, like Murder on the Orient Express, this film was directed by and starred Kenneth Branagh? Do you think the film is... Do you think the fact that he did both for Death on the Nile enhances it or detracts from it?
An
I think it does
interesting question.
either.
I think in some ways it is a detriment. In the way that, like I've been saying, the characters fall a little flat. It kind of seems like Kenneth Branagh thought that these characters had more depth than they actually did. I don't know whether that's just him dealing with the characters for a lot longer. Obviously, there's only a few that like stayed over, but him putting more like backstory onto Poirot and like no backstory on other people, I don't. It kind of seems, I always have a bias against Kenneth Branagh. He's a very good actor, but he does put the spotlight on himself. And in no better case than this is him putting the spotlight on himself and forgetting that there's other characters in the story. I can't say for sure that's the problem with the movie, but that is a trend that Kenneth Branagh has done before. So that's just my guess.
Max, Declan, what about you guys?
I think it's very difficult. I feel like Kenneth Branagh as a filmmaker is a very he's very interesting, and like I feel like there's a lot of like his style is like almost like uneven in like how much works and how much doesn't, and so I feel like thus for this film, I feel like a lot of like the visuals and like the look of a lot of it is really good, and he is able to get a lot of great actors in it, but also, as you were saying, it's kind of a detriment because it took a little bit away from maybe the mystery kind of, and maybe it was a bit unfocused in to be in a lot of cases. So it's a bit, I can't say definitively one way or another. I think maybe slightly it was maybe a detriment, but I'm not certain of that, is what I'll say.
I said it at the very beginning that I don't think it was really either one. I think one of the great things about Kenneth Branagh is that, for me, number one, he is a great creator, right? He is a great talent, and even though I didn't necessarily love Thor and the MCU or love this movie as much as I liked Murder on the Orient Express or loved Belfast, I think what he does best is tell stories that are tightly knit and not necessarily personal, but something that is grounded and relatable to him. I think maybe it was his decision or the studio's, or maybe even it was the scope of the source material in Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie, but this just felt too grand. I think the story was a great idea and it was a great concept, but I think it was a really challenging ask for him and for his creators and producers around him to execute in that. It is a bigger story than Murder on the Orient Express. It's a more complex tale, even if it is a little bit simpler in plot the way that it was presented on film. But I think there was potential for really interesting complexities that didn't quite come through. And, whether that was his decision or not, it doesn't really matter, right? It just got too big. and he as the director was in charge of navigating those storylines and threads throughout the movie, and did a really good job for the most part, but maybe missed in some pretty critical areas. And I think that is where I really come down on this film, is that highly entertaining, had much better potential than it actually was, big story. I enjoyed the film. I would see it again if someone asked me to go see it, but it pales in comparison to some of Kenneth Branagh's other efforts as director and just the story of the prequel in Murder.
Yeah. I think the bottom line is that his role as an actor director worked in Murder on the Orient Express. And I think with the size and scope, as Max was just saying, of Death on the Nile, I don't want to say this because I like Kenneth Branagh. I don't want to judge him too harshly, but I think as I was saying, size and scope of this film maybe stretched him a little thin. And I think there was more he could have done as both an actor and director for this one that you could have gotten if he had just been one or the other. And obviously, I don't think you could have recast Poirot if you were going to tie it into Murder on the Orient Express. But if you were making a Death on the Nile movie with Kenneth Branagh as your director and not even involved in the cast, that would have been a good film. If you were making a Death on the Nile sequel to Murder on the Orient Express with Kenneth Branagh as Poirot with a different director, that would have been really good too. So I think to answer my own question from a few minutes ago, I would say bottom line detriment. But like Max said, and like we've been saying, I enjoyed the film. It was a fun watch. Makes you think. I like mystery thrillers. It's worth the time. So with that, let's get into some final thoughts about Death on the Nile.
I'll go first, since I'm the most critical. I would say I definitely enjoyed some parts of it. But like, a bunch of you have been saying, personally, I think this story just requires way more setup. As you can see in the movie, the setup is about an hour. So you don't really have a bunch of time for the mystery. And that's just like the biggest problem with it. It's a mystery film with, half of the runtime isn't even the mystery because the end is revealing it. So you don't really get to engage with the mystery. It's just the setup, and then a few people die, and then all of a sudden you're given the answer after like 30 minutes of interview. So I was entertained, though until someone died, I was kind of waiting, and I didn't know why it took so long, because I've never seen a mystery movie that took so long to introduce the mystery. Overall, some very good performances, like I've said, some mediocre performances, entertaining, though not great.
Yeah, for me, I definitely, the good outweighed the bad. There were parts I didn't like. I think it didn't quite have as much focus as the first one, but there were still a lot of elements I liked. Some of the performances and other stuff on it. So I still enjoyed it, and I think if you're generally into mystery thriller or what have you, it's still worth watching. It's still worth your time if you're into the genre. It certainly was for me.
Or do you want
Max?
to go, or do you want me to close it off?
I could go next.
Okay.
Didn't like that it retconned the last scene of Murder on the Orient Express, where where Poirot is approached and someone says, "Oh, there was a death on the Nile," or I'm paraphrasing. But then, you come into this movie and he's just like, "Oh, I'm going to be invited to this this honeymoon party on a whim, and oh, someone gets killed while I'm here." So that was a little disappointing. I would have liked to see a little bit more continuity, one story into the next.
Maybe there was another death on the Nile that they were talking about.
True.
And then he just ends up there on a coincidence? I don't think
Die
so.
all the time.
But yeah, like Declan just said, it's entertaining because of the mystery thriller genre that it is within. I think if you like mystery thrillers, you will be entertained by this film. If you liked the first film, this one is pretty enjoyable. It doesn't stick around too long. It's only 2 hours, 7 minutes. And like Ben was saying, some of the performances are really good. So I would give it an average recommendation. Max, you want to wrap us up?
Sure. I'm not really gonna disagree with much that was just said. I do think I liked the film more than the other guys, but that's okay. I think that it was definitely a fascinating story. As I said before, it had great potential to be like a really intriguing and interesting take on love triangles and how those function. Kenneth Branagh, as I said, was great. I enjoyed his performance, but those around him also supported him well for the most part, and were delivered strong performances. But yeah, I definitely would recommend this film. I think it is fun. You should see it if you've seen the first one, just to see some of the character development and some repeat characters, which is always nice to see the connectedness. Yep. But yeah, I've said my negative piece already, so I won't go into it again. But for sure would recommend. And George, let me pass it back to you. Close this out.
Yes, sir. Death on the Nile is currently playing in most North American movie theaters. Go check it out. Let us know what you think. We will be back next week with another episode of Unqualified Film Bros. We're going to go from a novel adaptation to a video game adaptation. Not going to say what it is, even though there's only one movie in theaters right now. That is a video game adaptation. We hope you'll join us next week. Until then, have a good night and enjoy some good movies.
See ya.